Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session, which will consider the impact of violence within our local communities and ways that we can be proactive in affecting change. I'm Jerry Gorman. I'm from the board of Chicago Area Peace Action, and on behalf of CAPA, I want to thank you all for attending this morning. I also want to express our deep gratitude to our panelists, to Tony Haywood, graduate student at UIC's College of Nursing, who will provide preliminary remarks, and Sir Graham Davenport, staff member of Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, and to her co-panelists, Terrell Doyle and Aldina Brown, and to Sarah Knizhnik with the Newtown Action Alliance. Thank you all so much for all you bring to us this morning and for sharing your time so generously. And now I will turn it over to our moderator, Tony Haywood.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your weekend to be here to discuss these important issues. So as we all know, we'll be discussing local gun violence in Chicago's communities, and I'll be providing some context as to how global militarization influences gun violence at the local level. So conflicts that occur abroad influence what happens at the community level. So international conflict creates global instability demonstrated by militarization and a lack of trust in our international communities. This uncertainty is felt at the community level, and the response is to purchase weapons because people don't feel safe, and the result is an increased level of violence. So we saw this happen after 9/11. So stemming from the disruption of international peace, the United States saw a sharp increase in gun sales. And what followed was a tidal wave of hate crimes committed against anyone who was perceived to be Muslim or from the Middle East. And some communities view these hate crimes as an act of patriotism necessary to protect their country. Today, we see another increase in gun sales, which is being influenced by global militarization. So the war in Ukraine and the unprovoked attack on a sovereign nation has reignited global uncertainty. And the result on the community level has been the purchasing of guns. So international peace and peace within our own borders are becoming more fragile as this war continues. In addition, the United States is a key perpetrator of local and international violence, as we are the #1 exporter of weapons in the world, and our lax gun laws have forever changed the dynamics of so many American families. Throughout our nation's history, gun ownership has always been a divisive issue that has polarized political parties. While the right to bear arms is ingrained in the Constitution and is viewed as a fundamental American freedom, the Second Amendment has profound effects on American families. In 2021, the United States saw 693 mass shootings and over 45,000 deaths related to gun violence. More people were fatally shot in Chicago in 2021 than any other year on record. Over 40% of American households have guns, and almost half of us know someone who has been shot. So on a personal note, I was actually caught in the middle of a shooting that was at my local library when I was studying at Florida State for my undergrad. And my partner, who's born and raised in Chicago, was actually shot in the stomach. And luckily, he's okay. He survived. The unwillingness to change what constitutes a fundamental freedom stems from mistrust of others, gun lobbying in Congress, and a lack of research on gun violence, which impedes our ability to view it as an epidemic. In 1996, the Congress passed the Dickey Amendment, which prevented the CDC from using federal funds to investigate the epidemic of gun violence because it would advocate or promote gun control. The NRA used its friends in Congress to pass the bill and tried to eliminate the Injury Prevention Center altogether. Funding was eventually restored in 2019, and the CDC now supports nearly 24 gun violence studies. Still, the amount of funding spent studying gun violence is only a fraction of what is spent on studying disease like heart disease or cancer. And like war, gun violence is a public health crisis, but unfortunately, the true extent of the crisis is unknown due to the lack of research. We know that systemic issues create inequalities where some people are more likely than others to be victims of gun or firearm-related violence. Poverty is the most significant risk factor for gun violence, and this is true at the community and the international level. In addition, gun violence victims are uninsured or underinsured, or many of them may be, and they may be disabled for months or a lifetime after injury. Attempts to mitigate gun violence have included increased policing and harsher sentencing. These interventions do not address the community issues that need to be resolved for effective change. Instead, this further strains economically frustrated communities. And it's important to note that these systemic issues disproportionately affect people of color, and gun violence disproportionately affects them as well. So there were 800 homicides last year in Chicago, and 745 of those were fatal shootings. And most commonly, the victims are Black men aged 20 to 39. And as climate change destroys our planet, poverty and wealth inequalities are expected to grow worldwide, leading to a potentially dangerous era of militarization and gun violence if action is not swiftly taken. So we need research, community, and international policy intervention to resolve this epidemic, reduce socioeconomic disparities, and foster peace. So here to speak more about this is Teresa. Teresa is part of the Family Forward program at Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, which is a restorative justice hub in Back of the Yards. She will provide an overview and perspective on the restorative justice services provided and introduce the panelists involved in the program. And I just want to give everyone a reminder, everyone will have about 5 minutes to speak, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. So.
Thank you so much, Tony. I am so honored to be here today. I appreciate the invitation. As she mentioned, I work with Precious Blood Ministries, known as PBMR, and we are a restorative justice hub. There are 7 here in Chicago. We work with young men, young women, families. Here at Mother Brenner House, where I work, we work with women specifically, and we have a subset of women, 104, whose children have been lost to gun violence or incarceration, some both. And so we work with these women to help them move forward in ways that community of people being together, understanding the loss that they're feeling would only understand. And so we're just there to create the safe space for them to have that discussion in circle and to begin their healing. I also am a survivor advocate, working with people who have either been shot or whose family members are surviving their loved one who has been shot and killed. And so, as you can imagine, that's very tough, but the resilience of these men and women is just amazing, 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 and it's such a blessing. And one of the things that I often say is, you know, the families that are here in the community are definitely, their hearts go out to the community of people who have been harmed in Ukraine. But we see this on the streets of Chicago every day on a regular basis. And gun violence and the way that the guns got into the community obviously didn't come from the Black and brown young people that are sometimes the perpetrators of those crimes. And we are a restorative justice focus, that meaning that we are looking for healing both for the person that may have caused harm, understanding that they have to be accountable and take responsibility, but we want fair and equitable treatment and equality. And then at the same time, we want to work with the families that have been harmed. So you're gonna listen to Terrell Doyle first, and then Aldina Brown, who is a mom that has lost her son. Terrell has been shot. He's gonna share his story, and then I'll come back. Thank you. Terrell, you go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah, my name's Terrell Doyle, and I was shot in August 5th, 2021. Yeah, just like 6-7 months ago. And I'm currently recovering from I got shot in my back, in my lower back, and in my butt. You know, and I got a colostomy bag on currently. I got surgery in a couple of weeks to get it removed. But I mean, my only story, like I don't like it to me, like it's crazy to say, but like gun violence is just, it's like an everyday thing. Like it's normal and it shouldn't be. But in the city of Chicago, it's really like that. It's normal every day. Like it's hard. It's sometimes it's overwhelming. Like you know, for mothers and you know parents, you know, because they got their kids and stuff. And but it's just for us, it's pretty much just really it's like a way of life out here. Like you know, it's a lot of people that's growing up in like my communities and stuff. They coming up, you know, we growing up with the kill or be killed mentality. You know, it just you know everybody's you know just pretty much going at each other for pretty much scraps. You know, it ain't like it's just really a way of life. Like you could go out there right now, you will see a 12-year-old with a gun on him bigger than him. Like that's just how it is. And like, and those are majority, like a lot of times though, those are people that you really gotta tend to watch out for is the youth because they naive and you know, they don't really have no, it ain't really too much guidance. Like it's a lot of incarcerated African American fathers and stuff that's, you know, that's not out here to help guide and you know, try to lead the youth to greater heights or whatever. So I just me personally, I don't really it's hard for me to explain because I'm a person that like been out here in the streets like almost my whole life. Like it's crazy though that when I finally decided to get out the streets, that's when like I got shot and I was literally waiting on the Uber to go home and I got shot, you know, for something that had nothing to do with me, but and you know, I don't really know how to feel about it. Like cause I see people really lose their lives out here. Like this part of the effects of like growing up in Chicago, like you really don't have like no feeling about it. Like it's hard, cause it's like an everyday thing. It's a part of your life when you pretty much growing up in Chicago. I hate that it's that way, but it is. Like it don't matter what you're doing, positive, negative, gun violence. Like living in this city is gonna affect you in some way, cause either you know somebody that got shot or you either been a victim of gun crime. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, guns come randomly. Take it from me, they come. It ain't like no one say it ain't necessarily gun stores, nothing. It's all type of things that lead actually to guns, like coming into problem. Like for us, like it could be drugs, you know what I'm saying? And it could be white kids, literally, you know what I'm saying? They literally got addictions and they will literally like come to Chicago about drugs and selling guns for dirt cheap, literally. Like guns get out here everywhere. They coming from all over every state. It ain't just Chicago, it ain't Indiana. Like people go different places. You go Memphis, Minnesota, like all the like tri-states, like everywhere around the city. Like they coming from everywhere, and that's just my little piece of my personal experience on gun violence.
All right. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay, great.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Aldina Brown. I've been with a participant of PBMR for like, I believe since 2013 or 14, I'm not sure. But I came into the program as a parent of children who were incarcerated, which at that time I had 3 sons incarcerated. Now I could feel I have a foot on both ends because I've lost a child to gun violence and I've had children incarcerated. My son, Damon, he's 26 years old. He was incarcerated for 8.5 years. He was locked up since he was 17 years old for armed robbery. He was released last year, July the 3rd. And November the 17th, my son was shot to death here in Inglewood, 56 in Racine. And I just know that being a parent, it hurts really bad, despite of what people or what impression they get of the children. I know my son had a good heart. Now I can't say what he did and what he didn't do, because I wasn't around him 24/7, you know, but I know that these guns is taking so many. And it's like they go on with their daily lives as if they did nothing. And the parents and the family are left to suffer and deal with all of this heartache. I have 5 sons, and it hurts that one was taken away from me like that. That's why I pray and I do like talks and I do whatever I can to help to prevent these things and another parent having to feel how I feel. I have so many friends that we've lost our children. These guns, they say they need stricter laws, but the thing is, it needs to be like more. I think a lot of the children need more. You have to start when they're younger. They need more structure. You gotta love on them as much as you can. And I'm speaking from a mom's point of view. Now, I really can't say or speak for everybody, but I believe that love, structure, and more, community involvement would help. Now, thank you all for having me. I'm just really emotional right now. This is really hard to deal with, but I thank you all for listening to me, and God bless.
Thank you so much. Terrell talked about fathers that are not in the community. And a lot of that is because Black and Brown people are targeted to some degree, whether that be biases or racism or whatever you want to call it. It's skewed negatively for Black and Brown people. And you may hear gun rights activists saying, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And I believe that is true. But if we don't put some parameters around the guns and how they are acquired and the evaluations that take place, then that's one aspect of it where we fall short. And then the other aspect of it is equity and inclusion in the United States and around the world of people that I would be able to look at my brother or my sister and say that you are me and I am you, and I love you because I love myself, and showing value to our communities by legislation that shows. If you come to back of the yards where we are right now, you can look around the community and see the abandoned homes and things of that nature. That doesn't tell me that I'm loved necessarily, right? And so, one of the things that we do at Precious Blood is try to show people the value that we have, that we place in themselves, and try and talk with them about self-love and caring for themselves so that they can love others, they can love their communities. But it takes everyone being a part of that to bring that change about. It's not going to come overnight, but some of those hard stories have to be told. Some of those hard conversations need to be had so that we can get to the point of listening to each other, empathizing with each other, showing compassion for each other, and not sitting in the I think about the prodigal son for those people who are Christian, and where the younger son felt like I was doing everything right, and look at them, they didn't. And the father is still happy about that person. And that's what we really need to do. We need to throw a party for every individual in the United States in one way, shape, or form that says, I see you, I value you, I don't care about your gender, I don't care about your race, I don't care about, we're human. And so that's the thing that we try to work on and try to do at Precious Blood Ministries, and work with families like Aldina's family and Terrell's family to get to a place of healing, one person at a time. And I thank you and appreciate the time that you've given me.
Thank you everyone for sharing your stories. And yeah, with your Teresa, what you were saying about like compassion within our communities. I mean, it's all coming under fire right now. I mean, not even with gun violence, but I mean the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida and transgender rights in Texas. It's just like a difficult time, I think, for all of that. Okay, next we have Sarah. Sarah is going to be, she is the Newtown, she's part of the Newtown Action Alliance, which is a Newton-based national grassroots organization formed after the Sandy Hook elementary school shootings. Their mission is to achieve the steady and continuous reduction of gun violence through legislation and cultural changes.
Thank you very much, Tony. And thank you, Teresa, and to all the folks from Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. I have a presentation to show you. I was asked to speak today about how we can take action to reduce gun violence and what's going on at the state and federal levels. Let me give you a little bit of background information before I start the PowerPoint presentation, though. I was also asked to explain how I got involved in this work. And I got involved in this work because I am a suburban soccer mom who became a grassroots volunteer gun violence prevention activist about 6 years ago. And I was incredibly fortunate that the very first policy change I worked on was a state of Illinois bill that would reduce the trafficking of illegal firearms into underserved communities. It was called the Gun Dealer Licensing Act. And because the bill primarily was aimed at reducing violence in communities like Back of the Yards, I became acquainted with the professionals at PBMR and at many other community violence interruption programs around Chicago. I became acquainted with these professionals doing this amazing work, including Sister Donna. And Teresa, you and I haven't met in person yet, but I hope we will soon. And I'm incredibly fortunate as a woman of privilege to have started my journey in gun violence prevention by learning from these people, from these professionals at ending gun violence in underserved communities. Because what I realized right away is we have a gun violence crisis in this country, specifically because we have failed to address the inequities that disproportionately impact underserved communities like the one that PBMR serves. And these communities exist all over this country in large, small, and medium-sized cities. It is not unique to Chicago. And I'm going to try to make a connection for you now in my PowerPoint presentation about why our failure to address gun violence in communities that are underserved is why we have a gun violence crisis in America. But before we do, I've done this work full-time for 6 years. And I am here to tell you there is absolutely no greater crisis in America today than the proliferation and easy accessibility of firearms. There has been a 500% increase in firearm purchases since the beginning of the pandemic, and all of the tragedies you've been hearing about for the last 20 or 30 minutes have been exacerbated by that. And anyone who thinks that we're not at a crisis point on this issue just doesn't have the whole story. So I really appreciate Tony and everyone at PBMR helping sort of give me that entryway into my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen now. It doesn't look too professional because I rearranged some of the slides while Teresa and her friends were talking. So please excuse, I was trying to rearrange it to make it more appropriate to follow up on Teresa and Tony's comments. So you can see my screen now, correct? Tony, can everyone see my shared screen?
Yes, we can say it.
Okay, so how and why we should take action to support gun violence prevention. So in a moment, I'm going to tell you about a bill at the federal level that is our best chance to pass a gun safety bill in 30 years that has a real chance of becoming federal law. We have in recent years passed a couple of gun safety bills out of the House of Representatives in Congress, but for example, the bipartisan background check bill, but that had very little chance of making it through the Senate in our current political situation. So the bill I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes is different because it has the support of formally of at least one Republican, and it is a safe storage bill, which Republicans and the overwhelming number of gun owners agree guns should be locked up and kept away from kids. So before I talk about that bill, though, I would like to talk to you about Newtown Action Alliance, which is my current employer. And I would like to talk about our role as a member of the Invest in Us coalition. So the Invest in Us coalition has been around for about 1 year, and it is headed by something called the Community Justice Action Fund, which is the only national Black-led gun violence prevention advocacy organization in the country. Community Justice Action Fund is leading the Invest in Us coalition, and its purpose has been to get $5 billion in federal funding to so that it can go directly to communities like Back of the Yards, directly to organizations like Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. Organizations like PBMR have for way too long had to rely only on private funding. That is unsustainable in the long term. And that is why we need money from municipalities, states, and above all, the federal government, so that we can make the work of people like Teresa, so that we can support it and make sure she has the ability to count on the ability to continue doing her work at PBMR. So why then would an organization like Newtown Action Alliance, which symbolizes a tragedy that occurred in a community of great privilege. So Newtown Action Alliance was founded in the wake of Sandy Hook in December of 2012. 20 children and 6 educators were killed in a mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School on that day. And it is located in Newtown, Connecticut, which is one of the most affluent communities in the nation. And I am incredibly proud to work for them because Newtown Action Alliance recognizes that we cannot end gun violence anywhere until we end gun violence in communities that are underserved, which is why we have joined the Invest in Us coalition and followed the lead of our community violence interruption professionals in getting funding for their work. So there is a really profound truth that I'd like everyone to understand. Communities of privilege must worry about gun violence in their schools, faith communities, shopping malls, and workplaces because we have ignored the needs of underserved communities everywhere in America. We have allowed ourselves to think if we live in communities of privilege, that we somehow, that gun violence in Englewood is someone else's problem. And I'm going to try to make the connection with you for you now so that you can see you have to worry about gun violence, being experienced by your families, your children, your grandchildren, because we haven't worried about what's happening to the children Teresa is trying to save. We're all connected, and here's how. Gun violence is not someone else's problem, it's everybody's problem. So we must all work together to end it. Gun violence is high in Black and brown communities. We all know that to be true. What most people don't recognize is that high rate of gun violence in communities that are underserved serves the interests of the firearms industry, the gun lobby, and the members of Congress who take support from the gun lobby and the firearms industry. The reason it's in their best interest to keep gun violence high in communities that are underserved is because that allows the firearms industry to use racist marketing strategies to promote and sell its products. And you can see an example of it here, an AR-15 that is specifically marketed in order to encourage people who do not live in underserved communities to defend themselves from the supposedly dangerous people who live in those communities. This is false. The vast majority of people who live in communities like Back of the Yards are not at all violent. In fact, most of them are working very hard and doing everything they can to build as strong communities as possible. But because of our failure to address the gun violence crisis and most of all its root causes in communities like Back of the Yards, primarily the inequities in the criminal justice system that lead to a lot of millions upon millions of Black and brown men from these communities being incarcerated, in most cases for nonviolent offenses, and taking those mostly, well, men and women, those adults out of those communities. So I'm getting, I'm trying to, there's a lot more to it. I could do a whole presentation just about this connection, but in the interest of time, I'll continue making the connection for you. When the firearms industry succeeds at using their racist marketing strategies to sell firearms in communities of privilege, then people in those communities buy more guns out of fear. We know this to be true. It's heavily documented. And then as a result of that, there are many more guns on inventory in gun shops available to be stolen, many more guns in homes accessible to children and other people who should not have access to firearms. And there are many more guns available to be stolen. And that's I hope I've made the connection for you about how we are all connected. The main takeaway is, if you would like to see gun violence reduced everywhere in America, then you should start by prioritizing support for communities like Back of the Yards and for organizations like Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. So now I'd like to tell you how you can do that. There are two ways. First, I'm not going to go through this slide. It'll take a little too long, but in a moment when I'm done speaking, I'm going to put my contact information and email address in the chat. And if you email me, I will send you this PowerPoint presentation. So I'd like to talk about how you, every single person on this call, can take action today, quickly. It'll only take a few minutes, in order to try to get federal funding for Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation and the other organizations all over the country that are working to reduce gun violence in underserved communities. By advocating together, we and members of organizations like Newtown Action Alliance, organizations that make up the Invest in Us coalition, have succeeded in getting $5 billion in federal funding for community violence intervention programs. So those are programs just like Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, included in the Build Back Better Act. Despite what has been reported in the media, this initiative and many more from the Build Back Better Act are still being negotiated in Congress, and progress is being made. And Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky herself said that out loud in person to me and David Boris and a bunch of other people who were in the room about 2 weeks ago. So this issue is a bit confusing. I know you may have heard the Build Back Better Act is dead. They've renamed it, that's true. But many of the initiatives, including the $5 billion in federal funding for organizations like Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, are still being negotiated, and a great deal of progress is being made. So we are still working hard to make sure that that $5 billion goes to organizations like PBMR. So if you could please call your senators and tell them you want the BBA passed with the $5 billion in federal funding for CBI. That's one thing you can do today in order to help support PBMR and the thousands of organizations across the country that are doing similar work. Now, slide 9 has the calls to action with the exact information you need in order to take this action and call your senators. Next, there's a second bill at the federal level. It's called Ethan's Law, and it's named in honor of a child named Ethan Miller Song, who was killed January 31st, 2018, because he and his friend were playing with his friend's father's firearm and taking pictures of themselves and posting them on social media and getting a lot of traction. They did not know that the gun was loaded, and Ethan was shot in the head and killed instantly. Because of this easy accessibility of firearms, because of the proliferation of firearms everywhere in American life, it doesn't matter who you are or where you live. You are not safe until we start acting together and recognizing that we need to work together across communities in lots of different ways in order to reduce it. So HR 748, it's Ethan's Law. It is a federal safe storage bill. What it will require is that all firearms loaded and unloaded be safely stored in homes occupied by minors under the age of 18. If you email me and ask me for the PowerPoint presentation, you can click here and learn more about the bill. There are links throughout the presentation that you can use in order to take action and learn more. If a federal safe storage bill like this were in place, the following tragedies would have been prevented. Oxford, Michigan, Parkland, Florida, Newtown, Connecticut, 8 unintentional shootings of American children every day, 64 suicides by firearm every day, and many thousands more unnecessary killings. In March, the Newtown Action Alliance took a group of survivors to Washington, D.C. and asked them in person, meeting primarily with Republican senators and representatives, asking them for their support. I got a lot more I can say about this, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. But you can see the kind of work that Newtown Action Alliance does. We work with survivors of gun violence, and we go with them to advocate and for gun safety legislation, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. I'd like to tell you where we're at with Ethan's Law right now. Grassroots activists have forced Congress's hand on Ethan's Law. The truth is, 6 months ago, this bill had just a handful of co-sponsors, and then grassroots activists across the country decided that they were going to build support for this bill and try to force Congress to act. And we have done that. Because we have built so much support for this bill in the House, we currently have 214 co-sponsors in the House and 1 Republican representative who has promised to vote yes. The House Judiciary Committee is now considering creating a package of gun safety laws. This package will include a similar safe storage law that requires gun owners or gun dealers to lock up their guns, that is sponsored by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She is one of the leaders of the House Judiciary Committee, so we know that they're serious about getting this package moving. The plan is to introduce this package for a vote in early May during Police Week, and this effort is being strongly encouraged by the White House senior staff. You're not hearing much in the media about the White House's involvement and support for this bill, and that is by design. That's part of our strategy, because as soon as President Biden gets engaged on this issue, it becomes more political and it becomes harder for Republican legislators to come out in support of it. But that does not mean there's not support for Ethan's Law at the highest level. Conversations with Republicans about both the House and the Senate are ongoing, and this is where we come in, activists. We need everybody everywhere to call doesn't matter which party, to call their representatives and their senators and ask them to vote yes for Ethan's Law. So here are the calls to action. I'm not going to read through them all right now. Instead, I'm going to copy and paste them into the chat. Again, if you email me and ask me for a copy of the presentation, then they will all be there for you to use. So I'm putting the calls to action in the chat right now. Hopefully the links will work. And there are many things you can do here. I want to specifically invite everyone on this call to join me every Monday from 11 to 1 p.m. for a virtual nationwide lobbying event in support of both Ethan's Law and the Build Back Better Act and the $5 billion in federal funding for organizations like PBMR. You can register here. If you register once, excuse me, I don't know where my cursor is. If you register, okay, sorry. If you register once, you will never have to register again. You will just be invited each week to participate. It is always okay for you to join the lunch, register for the luncheon lobby, and then not be able to join. That does not bother us at all. Go ahead and register. If you do not have time to join for the entire 2-hour period, that's no problem. Just join us when you can. If Mondays midday are difficult for you, you can go ahead and register, and I will send you the information you need in order to make calls in favor of the 2 gun safety initiatives I've described today. So I'm gonna keep moving on to the next slide. Another thing that you can do is, if you are affiliated with any sort of progressive advocacy organization or gun violence prevention organization, we invite you to join the Keep Kids Safe Coalition. Currently, we have over 100 groups that have already joined. We meet weekly at 1 p.m. Central Time, virtually, of course. You do not, absolutely do not need to join those meetings. You can simply help just by having your organization's name on our list of coalition members. And I'm going to give you the link right now for how you can join the Keep Kids Safe Coalition on behalf of your GVP or faith or progressive advocacy organization. And finally, in the last slide in the PowerPoint presentation, I have several links that you can follow to learn more, to contact me with any questions, to learn more about Ethan's Law, to look up safe gun storage laws by state, learn more about the Ethan Miller Song Foundation and my work. I would love to take any questions if there is time, but if you only take one thing away from this presentation, please make sure it's this: communities of privilege, meaning all of us outside of underserved communities, must worry about gun violence everywhere because we have ignored the needs of underserved communities everywhere in America.
Could you repaste
into
the chat? It didn't come through. The link didn't come through in the chat.
It didn't come through. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to end. I'm going to stop
Keep
sharing my
Kids Safe
screen.
Coalition.
Yeah, there we go. So I'm putting the information in the chat now. So when you ask for the information, Jonathan, are you asking for the calls to action or how to join the Keep
Know
Kids
how to get our local organization to join the Kids Safe.
Okay, that's right here. Okay. So I'm putting that in the chat right now.
Thank you.
It looks like the link did not come through, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let me get that for you. And then in a moment, if everyone wants to just sit tight, after I share the link for Jonathan, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. And I invite all of you to email me if you would like a copy of this presentation. So Jonathan, do you see now the very last item in the chat? Anybody who clicks there, you can fill out an online form in order to add your organization to the Keep Kids Safe Coalition. And finally, here is my contact information. If you would like a copy of the presentation, please email me and I will be happy to send it to you. And if there are any questions and there's time, I would love to answer them.
I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. So if anybody has anything, feel free to shout them out or put them in the chat. Cindy had a question that she put in the chat and she said, why did it take the shooting of a white kid, Ethan, to bring the change?
There are a lot of reasons for that. And the first reason it took the shooting of a white kid is because it happened to a white kid and we have a deeply racist society. The second reason is Ethan's parents, Kristen and Mike Song, to be perfectly honest, have the resources in order to make this their entire life's work now. And the vast majority of people who are victims of gun violence in underserved communities, they do not have the resources. Many of them are working multiple jobs. Many of them don't have this. All we have to do is look around their neighborhoods to recognize they don't have the kinds of support that Kristen and Mike Song and many advocates from fully served communities have. I could go on and on, but I think those are the two #1 reasons.